Okay, so notes 12, solving for y. And the whole point of solving for y is so that we can get y equals mx plus b. And if you remember what y equals mx plus b is, it's called slope-intercept form. Okay, slope-intercept form. And why do we call it that? For the very obvious reason that you got the slope and the intercept. So you name things according to what they are. But let's just take our first example here. So let's just say, well, actually, before I do the number, I'm going to give you the directions. Okay. So the directions are find the slope and y-intercept of each line by first solving for y. Find the slope and y-intercept of each line by first solving for y. So I give you, now we're ready for number one. I give you something that looks like this. This is the graph or the equation of a line. Okay? And what we need to do is we need to get it into y equals mx plus b form. Okay? So we need to take it from what it looks like right now, and we need to get it into this form. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to use our algebra skills that we learned when we solved equations earlier this year and treat it like an equation. Whatever we do on one side, we do to the other. Well, if we look at this, we notice that y is by itself on one side, on the left side, and then we have the x term coming first, and then the number coming next. So that's kind of the order of things, the pattern that we need to copy there. Okay, so what do? Well, we're going to have to get this x off of the left side. So if we subtract it off the left, we need to subtract it off the right as well. So it's gone. Now what we do is bring down the negative 3y. And when we write our right side now, we're going to put the x term first. And you can see why that is. The reason is because mx comes before the b. So the x term comes first. So that we're already starting to see what looks like slope-intercept form. Our second step and last step is to divide out the negative 3 coefficient, just like we used to earlier in the year. So let's do that. When we divide the right side by negative 3, we're going to divide each term on the right side by negative 3, because that is the same thing. Dividing the whole side by negative 3 is the same as dividing each term on the side by negative 3 there. So you could just put like one big fraction bar and negative 3, but this is more helpful to write it under each term. So then when we simplify this, on the left side we have y, which is what we wanted. We have solved for y. Now we simply need to or simplify the fraction. This is something that you're going to need to know how to interpret. Negative over a negative, we all know is positive. So then what we're going to do is we're going to think of it more like this, x over 3, right? It's positive. So x over 3 is the same as a 1x over 3 is the same as, now watch this evolution, is the same as a 1/3 x. So we have to understand x over 3, there's an invisible 1 in front of the x, which is the same as 1x over 3, which is the same as 1/3, because really we're just multiplying the 1 and the x on the top. Okay, same thing as multiplying the whole thing by the x. So this is what we want to write. That allows us to clearly see our slope. So our slope is 1/3 x, and then 9 divided by -3, that's going to be -3. So right here, we've got our slope-intercept form. Our m, or our slope, is going to be the number in front of the x, not including the x. X is not part of the slope. And then the b is the -3. So m is 1/3, b is -3. We can write that off to the side. And I'm going to write arrows next to my rise and run so that I know what direction to go and how far to go from my plotted b when I do that. In this problem, we're not going to graph it, but still, I'm going to draw arrows so I know this means I go up 1 and right 3 from the b to get my second point to graph my line. So you're going to be asked to do that in the next or the second part of the worksheet for classwork 12. So that is our first example. Our second example, let's just try another one. And I think for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead with the graph, and then we'll do another practice one, for the sake of the video. Okay, so I'm gonna say just like the worksheet says. I think it says find the slope, y-intercept, slope, then graph. Okay, so that's what I'm asking you to do, and I'm going to give you this equation: 3x plus 5y equals 10. Okay, I'm going to get my graph off to the right here. Just a rough idea of what it should look like. My x, my y. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve for y to find the slope and y-intercept, because I need it in slope-intercept form. Again, we need to put it in the y equals mx plus b form. That's what we need to get. So like I did in number 1, subtract 3x, get the x term off of the left. Okay? Treat this like any other equation, because that's exactly what it is. It's an equation. Subtract 3x from both sides. Okay? What you're used to doing is dividing the coefficient, but that's not what you're doing in this step here. You're just taking the whole term and getting rid of it. So then we have 5y on the left here equals, and what do we put first? Our x term, because that's what comes first here. We want to put the -3x first, then the plus 10. Okay? And then finally we divide our 5 coefficient, because we just want to get rid of that 5. We don't want to get rid of the y, so we don't subtract, we divide. Bless you. So, like I said, dividing the right side by 5 is the same as dividing every term on the right side by 5. So that's why I have 2 of them here for 2 terms. All right. Then we got rid of those 5's, and y is by itself. This is our slope-intercept form. -3/5 x is how we think of that. And then 10 divided by 5 is 2. And we have our slope-intercept form. We have this form now. We can now identify the m it has emerged to be negative 3/5, and we can identify the b, which has emerged as 2. Okay, so now we know our slope and we know our y-intercept. So we've got this and we've got that. Okay, now we just need to graph it. So let's do that. We know it's going to go up 2 for the y-intercept. And is this slope positive or negative? Think about that. Is it positive or is it negative? So we've got our positive 2b. It's going to go on the vertical axis because that is the y-intercept, not the x-intercept. So we're right here. So you're going to plot that b. You're going to plot the b. If you want directions on how to graph from this, you can look at the Notes 11 video. Then you're going to trace the rise and the run to the second point. And we know what the rise is. We know what the run is. Again, our slope is negative 3/5. So we know that our rise is going to go down 3, and then run is right 5. So from the B, you're going to trace down 3, 1, 2, 3, down to there, and then you're going to go right 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And right there is going to be our second point. So we just traced down 3, arrow down, right 5. And there we have created our right triangle, and we have our 2 points for our line. And we are done.